Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, a window into the soul of the North Fork of Long Island. We'll delve into the pulse of our community, its pressing issues, promising opportunities, and the rich stories that weave our shared history. Today, on episode 65, I'm happy to have with us Dan Goodwin, Southold Town Highway Superintendent. Dan's story takes us back to his roots, growing up right here on the North Fork. We'll trace his journey from a young boy fascinated by engineering, through his college years, and into his career as a mechanical engineer and emergency response professional. Dan's tale is one of coming home. He'll share with us what drew him back to the North Fork and why he decided to take a leap and run for the Southold Town Highway Superintendent position in 2021 and win. We'll hear about the work he's doing in the Highway Department, tackling the challenges and seizing the opportunities to improve our infrastructure, enhance safety, and prepare for emergencies. And of course, we'll talk about what Dan loves about the North Fork and his hopes for its future. So I hope you enjoy episode 65 with Dan Goodwin. This episode was recorded June 5th, 2024. Thank you so much for coming on to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today.
Thanks, Chris. Really happy to be here. This is definitely a great project. There's a lot of interesting people that live in town, so it's kind of nice to hear some other people's stories and where they've been and where they're at in life now.
Definitely. And to start off, could you give us a little introduction about yourself, where you were born and raised?
Sure. So I've been a lifelong resident of town of Southold. Was born in Southampton Hospital and grew up in the same home in Cutchogue from the time I was born until I went away to college. Returned home and lived with my parents. And in 2015, ended up buying my own home in Cutchogue, probably about a mile as the crow flies away from where I was raised. So, I like to tell people I really haven't gone too far in life.
And how far back can you trace your ancestry, whether on both of your parents' sides?
Sure. So, a little bit of mix of background. On my mother's side, my grandfather's parents were immigrants from Russia sometime in the early 1900s, around 1910 or so, and they were farmers. They came over and had a farm in Peconic. On my mother's side there as well. On my grandmother's side of the family, they go back much, much farther, back essentially to the founding of Southold Town.
Wow.
So we have a bit of history there. And then on my father's side, the family history is not quite as clear there, but it goes back, well into the 1800s and possibly before then. Some real old town family names, in the mix there. So.
And with part of your family that came from Russia early on in the 1900s, were you able to find out the reasoning why they came over?
I think it was really just the opportunity to come here and have their own farm. They were very young when they came here. They had children very young, as they did in that time. So I think it was just the opportunity that America had at that point versus, what their homeland of Russia was.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to come here and establish a farm, and that farm was able to be passed through the family, and the property is actually still. It's not owned by the family anymore, but it is still open space that is, utilized as a bit of farmland currently. So
yeah,
I think it was really just that opportunity that was there for them in this country.
Mm-hmm. And then so on your father's side, that goes back a lot further within the town of Southold. what did your grandparents do or your father's father do on that side?
So, my mother's my grandmother's side of the family is the one that goes all the way back in
Oh,
Southold.
okay.
But my father's father, we'll kind of segue into that, is actually pretty interesting. My paternal grandfather, I never met. He passed away in the late '60s, unfortunately. But I heard a lot about him through from my father over the years, and he actually worked for the Southold Town Highway Department. And one of the things that was pretty interesting early on in my tenure in the department, kind of going through some historical records and cleaning out some of the paperwork and filing things appropriately and making sure that we had basically getting some space back. We had some really old records there that we didn't necessarily need to have at our fingertips at a moment's notice. And there was actually a payroll ledger that we had found, a really old bound book from 1955, and we sort of just opened the page up, and his name was right there on the page. And it was an interesting moment. It wasn't something I was quite, expecting, but it was definitely an interesting thing. So he worked as a road maintainer for the highway department, and he did that until he passed away.
Mm. And what about your parents?
So my parents, they're lifelong Southold residents also. My father was actually born in Cutchogue in a farmhouse on Bridge Lane. He moved to Depot Lane where I was raised and has lived in that home since he was 6 years old. My mother was, born in Greenport Hospital here and raised in Peconic on the family farm on Indian Neck Lane. And, she's been in town her entire life as well. So they both worked for the Matatuck School District when they were working. They're both enjoying their retired life as grandparents and helping me and my wife out with our two kids. So it's really great to have those guys close and still with us. And the family aspect of our life is a big portion of it. And we're really fortunate to have them so close with us.
Yes. And I was just curious, did they have any stories or any memorable experiences that they would tell you with them growing up on the North Fork that you could think of?
Sure. I think in the time period that they grew up, just like a lot of people out here, our whole area was centered around agriculture and our natural resources. My mom being raised on a farm, that was what they did. They worked on the farm. They helped tend to the crops and sell the crops and do all that sort of thing. My father, worked on farms. He was actually drafted and served in the Army in Vietnam, so he was, away and overseas during that time. But when he returned back, just, working on farms, lobster boats, all that sort of stuff, that was the bread and butter, the everybody's life source for the area at the time. My father went on to work at Grumman in Calverton and was there until they closed in the early 90s. And at that point, it was sort of, he had a young family with myself and my sister. Figuring out what the next step was, and he sort of worked for a few different people in town until he ended up getting into Matatuck School District and working over there. Mm-hmm. My mother went away to SUNY Cobleskill and got a degree. Came home, sort of worked in the bank, raised me and my sister when we were younger, and then went to school, worked with the school district once we got older, like a lot of families sort of did in those years around this area.
Yes, and so for you now, how was it for you growing up as a child in the area, and what experiences did you have as a child or activities you would do, say, on the weekends or outside of school?
Sure. I think we live in the best place in the world, personally. I really don't think that I could have asked for a better place to grow up. I think we're very fortunate that we have so many natural resources around us that just lend us to having so many activities and things that you have the opportunity to do that a lot of people don't. So I mean, as an early upbringing, I mean, riding bikes on Oregon Road, going up to the various road end beaches. I mean, in the summertime we essentially lived at the beaches, the Sound beaches or Bay Beach, and everything that went along with that, fishing, digging clams, going crabbing, all those sort of outdoor activities, just going for a walk in the woods. I mean, it was great, as we got older, take the bicycle a little bit further. Maybe you had a dirt bike or a quad, and, friends would get together, and every day after school we'd go take a ride. And, we had a lot of open land at that point. We knew all the farmers that were still operating, and as long as we were respectful with them and what they had going on, they were good with us and happy to share that property. So just a lot of outdoor activity, type stuff, and family orientated activities with, barbecues and family get-togethers in the summer and things of that nature. So that was a lot of stuff that I like to do. I still enjoy to do those things, and kind of, it's just a good way to sort of relax and take your focus on the day-to-day, for sure.
Definitely. And what about your schooling experience? Did you start out in Peconic or Cutchogue-Peconic?
So I was in Mattituck School District my entire life. I actually went to kindergarten, which was a half-day kindergarten at that point, and first grade at what's now the administrative building on Depot Lane. That used to be called Cutchogue West Elementary. So I did kindergarten and first grade there. And then what's now the junior high and high school in Mattituck, I went there until fourth grade. So second, third, and fourth were in that building. And then we went to Cutchogue East, which is now the elementary school, for fifth and sixth, and then went back to the high school for the rest of 7 through 12. It was great. I still see a lot of the teachers that I had around town, and some of them have become friends over the years, and worked for them and all that sort of stuff. So it's really pretty. It's definitely a unique personal sort of experience. It's pretty cool. It's pretty funny. My first official day, in the office, we were going to have some snow, and the very first text message that I got when I woke up my first morning, that Monday morning, that I was going to head into the office, because the first was on a Saturday or Sunday, so it was the second or the third was that Monday of 2022, was a text message from the superintendent of Mattituck School, who was the principal when I graduated from Mattituck, asking me, hey, what do you think the roads are going to be like? Can we open school for the day? So it was just sort of it was a pretty funny way that things kind of worked out. It was just, it's pretty interesting, which I don't think a lot of people would necessarily have an experience like that anywhere other place in the world. So
yeah. And what were you kind of interested in, say, within your high school years? Would you gravitate towards any specific subject matter or core class?
I really enjoyed science and math, and just figuring out how things worked. And I mean, from a young kid, my father, he worked in the hydraulic shop in Grumman, and we always had projects going on at home, whether it was cars and motor rebuilds or small engine type stuff and things of that nature. We always helped people out, and it was a little side income as well. And so I spent a lot of time in the shop with my dad, learning about everything mechanical, and I've always kind of gravitated towards that, and that's always had my interest, and I sort of knew that from the bat, and it was just, what am I going to do with this moving forward, and I really enjoyed science and math and the numbers and figuring all that stuff out. So, as we went further through my high school career, started looking at, what do we think, what's a good idea to use some of these skills, but also be able to kind of maintain the hands-on end of it, which is what I really enjoyed. In high school, I always had a job. I always was working as much as I could. And, if I wanted, if I wanted, the expensive toys, the dirt bikes and stuff like that, I had to get them myself. And the only way to do that was to go to work and earn the money. So I ended up pursuing a degree in mechanical engineering. So when I graduated in 2006, I went up to Western New England College in Springfield, Massachusetts, a small school, about 3,500 students. And in 2010, I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. Have a couple other little specialty certifications that I pursued while I was up there. And I always knew I wanted to come back home. So I came back home and took a job at a local company headquartered in Calverton, and worked there for over 10 years before becoming highway superintendent.
Mm-hmm. And what did that job kind of entail? Was that more...
So that job was an environmental response contracting company. So we did everything from major infrastructure facility maintenance type deals to emergency response for oil spills and any other man-made or natural disaster that occurred. So we did a lot of things. We wore a lot of hats there. But the advantage to that is I got to see and be involved with and learn a lot in a short amount of time, really, in retrospect to a total career. Worked a lot of hours, so there was a way to gain a lot of knowledge just through the time on the job. But we worked on a lot of really interesting things, all the way from New Jersey to Montauk and along the Connecticut shoreline. I was involved. It was a multi-state operation, so involved in projects, up and down the Atlantic seaboard and a variety of things. I mean, major container cargo ships to online power stations and oil terminals and things of that nature. So a huge variety of work. Every single situation was different. A lot of really critical infrastructure type projects. So it was really, really interesting, and not necessarily 100%, your typical mechanical engineering type position, more of like a project management position, but a lot of the skill sets of the engineering background sort of came into play, with figuring out some of these really unique problems that our customers had. And that was sort of the niche that company was able to carve out over its history since its inception was, you don't necessarily come to the company with the solution for the problem that you want them to execute. You just come to them with the problem, and they're able to figure it out for you. So it was a great learning experience. Really, fun thing to be a part of.
Yes, and I also had another question related to just kind of people growing up here and going away to college. Were you? And you decided to come back, but at some point were you thinking at the time of graduating high school that you wanted to move somewhere else and see something else at the time? Or even, say, after you were in college for a bit, were you set on coming back to the area, or were you open?
When I went away, I always said I wanted to come back here. And, my parents were basically, go away and get this education and see where life brings you, see, what happens. And Springfield is a much different place than here. It's not a coastal town. It's landlocked. The school's campus is located on the outskirts of what I guess you could consider the city of Springfield. And I just missed, having the open views and the salt water be within a mile or two drive or so. All the fishing and everything that there was here. So I knew I wanted to come back home. It was just a matter of figuring out how I was going to be able to do that and support myself to move forward, with the limited amount of industry that we have here. So, I guess the answer to the question is I certainly could have stayed there. There were any one number of aerospace companies or manufacturing companies up in that region that were hiring quite literally every single person that was graduating. There was a tremendous need for engineers up in that region. I had several job offers. I just knew I wanted to come back home. This is where all my family is, and that was a really important part of the whole picture to me. So, it was just come back home, live at home, save my money, eye on the prize of all right, I got this degree. I put my nose to the grindstone for 4 years. An engineering degree is a pretty tough thing to get. It's a pretty rigorous program. You gotta want to do it. So accomplish that goal and sort of just set the next goal on. Okay, I got to come home, get myself established, get a good job, and start moving towards saving funding to get a home, and that's what I did.
Yes. And I guess we'll jump a little bit to your current position, and could you share how the opportunity came about for you to run for the superintendent of highways for the town of Southold?
Sure. So, I've always kind of had this as an idea in the back of my head of, that'd be a really good job to have, closer to maybe my retirement years. Let me go out and learn a lot in industry in various places and sort of come back home and serve the community, and take care of the place that I've lived my entire life. And there was just one day, and I was sort of looking through, what positions were coming up for the next election cycle, which was a year away or so. Just out of my own curiosity, seeing what offices were open and what was going on in local town, government. And I noticed superintendent of highways, and then we actually had a party at my house, and I had a few friends that afternoon that were there that's that weekend. And I was like, hey, what do you know about this? One of my good friends is another elected official, and he's like, yeah. He goes, the position's open. He's like, I could see if when they're doing the screenings for it, and see what they think. He's like, I think it would be a really good fit for you. And I said, yeah, well, I'm thinking later in life. And another friend of mine that's here and grew up together, they're basically like, why wait? Why not just try now? And see, like, why? There's no point in waiting. Why don't you do it now? And you're only going to have more time to do better, better things. So
Yeah.
It sort of just started from there, and went through the screening process and was selected as the candidate and ran an election. And a campaign is a tough thing for anybody that's done it. It's a lot of time. It's what you make of it. It's how much time you want to put in. But I sort of set out that I was going to do this, and I was going to do it one time, and I was going to put everything that I could put into it at that point. And I think that's what I did, and I was fortunate enough to gain the trust of the voters.
Mm-hmm. And then, so how long have you been superintendent?
So I was elected in 2021, took office January 1st, 2022. So I'm 2.5 years into my first term, 4-year term.
And what does a typical day look like for you as superintendent of highways?
Well, a typical day, I'm typically in the office by 6:30 in the morning, and basically at that point, deputy will come in, or he may be there a little bit before me, and we essentially have our cup of coffee and sort of talk about everything that we planned the day before of what we're going to do for that day, and then make adjustments as needed if the weather didn't quite pan out to what it was forecasted for, or we have something that's popped up in the meantime that we need to take care of, or crew members are out sick, and that kind of changes what we're able to do based on manpower. So it's a very fluid, the mornings early on are a very fluid sort of situation where we're sort of rearranging what our workflow is going to be for the day. At that point, 6:45 in the morning, we'll have our foremen start coming in. And in my office, this was something that I had put in my office. We have 2 big dry erase boards with magnetic pieces, and then each piece has an employee's name, which is color-coded to what their job title is. So that depends on what their skill set is, their job title. So we start quite literally moving. We have those pieces set typically at the end of the previous day, so that we're ready to go in the morning, but we make whatever final changes we need to make, and then we dispatch what the jobs are going to be, for the day. and certain crews may hit multiple places in a day. Some may be working on one specific project for a day. Some may be doing, one road crew foreman maybe just be overseeing various crews that are out doing mowing or sweeping in various portions of the town. So in the mornings, we're pretty much solidifying our workflows for the day, getting everybody going. We get them going, get everything they need, get those guys out of the yard and out onto the road. And then we sort of switch gears to processing requests that have come in. I'll typically sit down at the computer at that point and start replying to people's emails that, situations that they may email me about the previous day that I've gone and looked at already, and I have a response of, yes, this is a problem, we're going to take care of this, or I need to get a little bit more information about where this tree is actually located, or, can we arrange a site meeting? And then from that point, we're getting closer to probably 9 o'clock in the morning, we'll start going out and hitting the road. So we get, a complaint about something, or I have to go to a meeting for, any one of the commissions that I sit on or committees that I sit on. And we basically go out and start working through that punch list of things. And that'll take several hours throughout the course of the day. Check in on a few jobs if that's needed, with certain things, just check in with the crews. And then in the afternoon, we basically have a pretty good idea as to what we accomplished that day before. If crew is working on a really big tree takedown, for example, and they need an extra day, or we need to go a little bit further down a road that we're trimming, or the drainage project needs another day or 2 days to be tied off and installed, or the potholes, we didn't cover everything. We basically start preparing our plan for the next day based on what our anticipated attendance is. Okay. And getting that work order process going. And then the end of the day, we meet with the road crew foremans all again and the shop foreman, and have a pretty good understanding as to what we actually got accomplished between that delta of time, sort of make those final tweaks, answer whatever emails have come in during the day, sort of look at any other complaints that may have come in, via phone over the day, and just kind of process all that stuff. And then I generally try to wrap it up and be out of the office by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Nice. And then see what happens, what the nighttime brings. Yeah, you never know what the night could bring. A lot of trees come down at night, or whatever it may be, and we get that phone call from the police department, and
do you have to be on call?
So I'm the primary contact from the police department. So if the police department receives notice of somebody, they'll send an officer out. The officer assesses the situation, and then if it's something that needs our assistance, police dispatch will contact me, and then we kind of take it from there.
And what would you say are some of the most common challenges your team faces in maintaining the Southold roads and infrastructure? Infrastructure.
The biggest thing, we have a fairly large network. People, we're a small town, but we have 400 lane miles of road. And that includes 10 miles out on Fisher's Island, which is, our easternmost hamlet. We have a pretty small road crew in comparison to everything that we handle based on the size of our network. And I mean, we're dealing with not only the road surface, the sidewalks, the trees, the grass, everything that's within that right of way. That's what a lot of people don't seem to understand the concept and grasp it really, but the right of way and what we maintain with the highway department, it extends beyond the paved surface of the roadway. So by and large, most of our roadways, I'll say, our right of ways, say 90 to 95% of them are a 50-foot right of way. So if you have a road surface that's only 26 feet, for example, that additional 24 feet is grass or trees or whatever it may be. And the roads are not necessarily set directly in the center of that. So, when I talked before about going out and needing a measurement on a tree, sometimes that edge of that road is on, let's say the south boundary of that right of way, and there's 25 feet of grass on the north side. There could be a tree that's 20 feet off the road surface, and that's a town tree. It's within our right of way. We're responsible for it, or vice versa. It could go the other way. So there's a lot of vetting out with some of the complaints that we need to see, okay, where does this actually lay with our jurisdiction and our responsibility? And then just the number of tasks we have to do and the amount of area we have to cover it on versus what our personnel resources are. That's a tough balance, and striking the balance between the magnitude and the order of priority on some of the complaints, and then having that conversation with the public and trying to give them the most transparent and realistic idea as to when they can anticipate that their problem that they've identified is going to be taken care of, or if it can't be taken care of, why, and what the reasoning is for that.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the size of the department. It's relatively small for the amount of land and lanes. If you look further west in Suffolk County, are those departments much smaller? And
every one employee sort of has a route, so to speak. So that's their territory that they maintain. That's their territory that they, snowplow, patch the potholes on, and that sort of thing. In polling some of our neighbors, they do have a bit smaller routes than what our employees have. The other thing, perhaps one of the bigger parts of it, is a lot of other townships rely on outside contractors to accomplish some of their work. We, by and large, do everything in-house, which is a tremendous cost savings, for the way the department is run. And that's historically the way that the town has always done it. It's, something I'm happy to keep supporting, because hiring contractors is expensive. There's townships that hire tree removal contractors, and don't get me wrong, we do that with certain trees that are exceptionally large, that are maybe bigger than the equipment we have, or an extremely technical takedown where it's hanging over a building or something of that nature, or in the case of some of the more historic trees, we want to have a really good arborist prune these to try to extend their longevity. But pretty much the only thing we're going out of house on a regular basis are our paving program is completely out of house, with the exception of our pothole patching and some of our smaller hot asphalt repairs, and some of our more technical drainage installs where there might be some really critical underground utilities, namely electric, that we're not really equipped to sort of work as safely as we should around them. So we'll hire a contractor in for those situations as well.
And I think you kind of mentioned how you, in terms of gathering feedback and addressing some concerns that people might share, the way to do that for people is to submit online, to email the department. Is that how you get feedback? Is that your main way of engaging with the Southold community?
So there's a couple of ways that people can engage with us. Email is definitely a really good thing because there's a history there, and especially, if it's an ongoing problem with things, there's able to be documentation there. A lot of people like to send pictures of an issue. Email's a really great way to do that. The limitations with email are, some of the server and firewall constraints. Sometimes we've had people that try to send 10 or 20 pictures and it gets kicked back. They don't realize that it gets kicked back. It just gets blocked automatically, and we have some issues with communicating there. So I always tell people, send an email. If you don't get an email back, or something's really, or you just want to follow up, pick up the phone and give us a call. You'll always talk to somebody that's live. One thing I was able to implement in the last couple of years working with our IT department was to get a really good voicemail system. So even after hours, if somebody's not there, there's basically 3 voicemail inboxes there. One is the general department, which everybody, the 2 office staff, myself and my deputy, will receive the distribution on that. So that's, even a vendor from the West Coast that's operating on a different time period, they can call in still. Our office staff leaves at 3:30 Eastern time, so they might be calling at 3 o'clock Pacific time, and nobody's there. But they can leave a voice message, and then that gets transcribed to email, and we're able to see it. There's an option there for myself for a voicemail box that's personal directly to me, and then my deputy as well. So that phone call to talk to somebody is always a good way to follow up with a message. If, hey, you didn't get this response, whatever else. I respond to everybody that I get messages from. People don't always necessarily like the response because it might not be what they expected or anticipated, but we always address what the concern and the problem is one way or another. So email's a good way to do that. Phone call's a great way to do that. That goes into a work order system that we have in-house. And then those work orders are, given to myself and my deputy, and one of us will look at them and assess what we need to do. Sometimes if it's something simple, we'll just write it down. We'll add it to our list. That'll go on to our dispatch board, and it might get taken care of within 2 or 3 days. If it's something bigger or a more complicated solution, we're going to call that person back and have a conversation with them, or say, hey, can we schedule a meeting with you? And I prefer to do that. I like to come out and, a lot of people say, I got these problems, I want to bring them to you, and this and that and the other thing. And it's like, the problem isn't in my office. The problem's over on Moores Lane in Greenport, Moores Lane North. We need to come out. Let's go walk this issue down with you. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at this together and work through this. So I prefer my deputy to go out and have the face-to-face meetings with people, and people are generally pretty receptive to that, and I think they kind of appreciate it. It's something that we're able to do. It's definitely a bit extra work on our end, but I think it's the best way to communicate exactly what the person sees as the problem, how we see the problem, and then what we can do to work together to get this, taken care of one way or another.
Yes. What advancements in transportation infrastructure do you foresee having the greatest impact on Southold in the future?
That's a pretty good question. I mean, there's so many ways that I guess you could look at that, One of the biggest things that we've been doing by help of our GIS department is sort of building a catalog and a really good visual aid to what's town infrastructure, what may be village infrastructure, county, state, or private. So on the town's website, there's a really good map that we've vetted out and spent a lot of time, going through deeds and the local highway listing that's listed with the state as to what are actual town roads, what are county roads, what are state roads, what are private roads, and sort of visualizing that for people. We have a lot of people that have purchased homes recently, and they call and they say, yeah, I have a problem with such and such road, and I'm like, okay, well, that's a private road. That's not within our jurisdiction to do anything with. So we're just looking at growing that sort of resource and what other layers can we put on top of that. It's been a little bit of news coverage. The new supervisor, Al Krupski, is really taking the coastal resiliency initiative as a big part of what we need to be working on, and he's 100% right. We're dealing with some flooding and things in areas more frequently than it's been dealt with in the past. Yes, these are historical flood issues. I'm not discrediting that at all, but we're dealing with them more frequently. In the last couple of years that I've been in this position, I can't tell you how many 100-year storms we've had. So we're dealing with this, and we're looking at how can we communicate this to the public so that people kind of have an understanding of, hey, if a storm is coming and it's going to be of these sorts of conditions, these are areas that you may have issues accessing, or this is the reroute to go around this area. This is an area where you may want to either plan on hunkering down or getting out of there. So just using that technology to sort of communicate in a really visual, easy to digest way. But then to take that communication, that technology and that mapping further on the back end for our operational, needs in the department. The engineering department has comprehensively mapped all of our drainage structures that are known in town based on what's actually out there and what's known on, historical subdivision plans and documentation that we have. So looking at taking that further from the highway perspective of marking off what roads were paved when they were paved, so that we know what that actual life cycle is of that pavement, when those drains were reinstalled or upgraded or installed newly or serviced even. I'd like to even start taking that in the next few years into doing sign inventories, where we have, this is the location of where this sign is, this is when it was installed, this is the picture of it when it was installed. So just sort of building this almost catalog that'll help to streamline our back-end operations of how things happen. If we get a complaint that, hey, the speed limit sign is missing from this location, and we're able to go back to this map in a few years and see, yeah, there was a sign there, and it was installed at this date, and when did it go missing? How did it go missing? Or, yeah, there was a sign there. Now there's a driveway there. So now we got to talk to whoever put the driveway in and sort of figure out what went on. So there's a lot of tools like that we're sort of trying to develop in house. The work order system, works the way it is. If somebody gets a phone call, they place it in, and it spits out basically a work ticket that we're able to look at and make notes on, and we can input those back into the system. So something like that is simple and it works. There's no use to reinvent the wheel on something like that. So
okay. And what about, are there any initiatives or projects aimed at incorporating, say, green infrastructure, renewability energy solutions in the Southold's transportation network?
That's more of like capital type projects, but we've been working to try to increase the condition, make the condition of our sidewalk network better. It's part of the Transportation Commission work. They're looking at, and it's been approved by the town board. This is more of the DPW end of it because they'll be placed on town properties, but bicycle rack locations, and then that's going to be tied into a map that'll show what the bicycle rack locations are. As far as the green infrastructure, it's not directly tied to that, but we have a big push on containing our stormwater and getting some of our stormwater mitigated to direct discharge to various water bodies that we have. So we have a really big push on that right now. We have grant funding from various agencies that are helping us out with do these things, and within the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to have several really major water bodies across town that the town is zero discharge to, which is really, really an important part, for a lot of reasons. We talked earlier that, we have these beautiful beaches and natural resources that we like to enjoy fishing and shellfishing and all that sort of stuff with. The nitrogen loading and the pollution that's caused into those due to discharge of stormwater into them, that can affect whether those beaches are open or closed and those shellfishing areas are open or closed. So if we take our factor out as being a contributor to that, that's sort of helping. I guess that kind of ties into the greener infrastructure. We're not really using any sort of new techniques at this point. We're using recharge as our technique, but it's certainly an improvement than our straight pipe discharge, directly into the surface water body.
No, definitely. And I was curious, do you have to work with the county in terms of the North Road? That's a county road?
It's a county road. So the county road starts just west of Coxneck Lane in Mattatuck, and then comes out to the intersection with Main Street out here where it transitions back to a state road. So the town, we do have 1.5 miles of Sound Avenue in Mattatuck, which extends from the Riverhead town line to that jurisdiction change just west of Coxneck in Mattatuck there. So that 1.5 miles, that 2-lane road, it is a town road at that location.
Okay. Yep. And say for emergency response in terms of natural disasters or other emergencies, obviously if there's things that are more on the town level, you have to work with that, but how do you work with something, say, that's on the North Road with the county? How do you interact with them if there was flooding or trees down on the North Road? So
the town, we have an office of emergency management, and I sit on that committee as well. Supervisor, Chief of Police, Information Technology, DPW, our Human Resources team, just to name a few people. And part of that is we communicate with Suffolk County FRES. So the county is good. They have a local yard out this way, that's staffed. They basically have, it's the county DPW is essentially the county highway department. So anything that happens within that boundary, they take care of. They have personnel equipment out here to respond to that. If we have bigger needs, if something bigger is going on, our request would go into the county, and they sort of distribute what their resources are based on the request as they come in and the severity of them. There is coastal resiliency is in the budget at the county level for this year, And there's several areas that we've identified at the town level that have been discussed at the county level of areas that they should be taking a look at. And how does our neighboring infrastructure tie into, those areas, and what can we do to help with a project in those areas to increase the reliability of our network there. So it's just a matter of having good communication with the county, being aware of what they're doing versus what we're doing, and sharing that information kind of back and forth. We do have good contacts at the county where, we can call them 24 hours a day and let them know of things. And I've called them and let them know about things that I've seen on, their roads. They've called and let me know about things that they've seen on our roads near our intersections. So it's been a really good relationship working with those folks. Just sort of trying to preemptively maintain a lot of things and stay on top of stuff, catch the problems before there's a problem, really, is what we're trying to do. And we've been working pretty well at doing that together.
Are there some instances from past emergencies that have informed your department's approach to the crisis, or how you would manage that in the future, say with, well, like we're coming up to hurricane. Well, we're in
hurricane season, June 1st. Yep.
So obviously, it's hard to plan exactly how.
Yeah, when you're dealing with a storm and Mother Nature, it's
unpredictable.
It's called a forecast for a reason. Yeah. You don't know. It's one of those things, and the way I kind of view this position is, it's an easy place to be, the Monday morning quarterback, so to speak, on it. I catch myself doing it a lot of times to myself, because I'm always just trying to continually learn and process and get more efficient at what we're doing. I think you need to learn from your past experiences and try to get better if you can. And there's a lot of things where you're like, oh, I could have done this a little bit differently and done that or what, and you can drive yourself crazy thinking about that. I think the biggest thing that I've been trying to impress upon a lot of people, been speaking to, a lot of civics, been speaking to a lot of people in King Cullen and Cutchogue, picking up a bunch of bananas. Hurricane season's here. Everybody kind of needs to be prepared. It doesn't cost a whole lot of time, money, or resources to kind of have at least a borderline plan in place for your own personal situation of, hey, I live near the water. How is this going to affect me? Or I live in a really, treed lot, and this one tree is kind of hanging over my house and it's got some dead limbs in it, and I'm not really too comfortable with that thing. Maybe I should get somebody to take a look at it. So everybody's got their own personal needs and assessment that they kind of got to make. And from the perspective of, the highway department, we're there to deal with the rights of way and clear things out. So in preparation for that, part of this exercise that I spoke about earlier about going out on the road and meeting people and looking at these complaints, and if I have 2 or 3 work orders to go look at for a given day in, let's say, Orient, hey, you know what? Today's a good day. I'm in Orient. I'm going to pull my town map out that I have of everything that we own. I need to go to Village Lane to look at this issue. I got to go to Land's End Community to go look at this. I'm going to cruise through these roads, and I'm going to take a look at anything here that doesn't quite look right. It could be a problem for us in the future. Take a little bit of a closer look at this, and we find a tree that's 10 feet off the road, 5 feet off the road. It's a town tree, and it's like the whole backside of it's, full of ants and termites, and it's all rotted out. It's got a big giant dead leader in it. It's like, that thing's got to go. Let's get it on the schedule to take it down. Let's preventatively take this thing down, get this taken care of. This is a drainage issue that we know we have on a 3-inch rainstorm, 2-inch rainstorm. Let's see what we can do to fix this. Let's, just trying to get ahead of some of these problems. And the idea is that the complaints, eventually, you're never going to get to zero, but we start minimizing the complaints and the work orders that are coming in, that are legitimate. I hate to use the term complaint because they're legitimate things that need to be taken care of, 9 out of 10 times. But what can we do to sort of get ahead of this? And have to say, and Chief of Police and I have spoken about this before, when we get a wind event now, we're not dealing nearly with the amount of, trees down in the road or limbs down in the road or wires that are getting knocked down. So we've identified a lot of these bad issues. Don't get me wrong, it's still going to happen. We still have trees that'll drop a limb with not a breath of wind anywhere near us, and they just randomly drop a limb in the middle of the night. It happens. It's going to happen. It is what it is. But we've significantly cut down on those sorts of things, and that's only going to help us, moving forward, to the point now where a lot of our call outs that we get in the middle of the night when we have a wind or a rainstorm or something like that is a tree falling off a private property across a public roadway, which is not something that we can do anything about because the tree was originally located on the private property. So we're responding to the issues that are out there that people bring to our attention. But when we're out doing that, we're also identifying a ton of work on our own and sort of taking that stuff on proactively to try to limit our exposure to any sort of unknown variables that could come up. So that's something, just becoming more proactive rather than a reactive is what is the model that I'm trying to sort of run the department with.
Yes. And what about obviously it's hard with funding and getting money for roads and preparing for flood-prone areas. Do you see that as a challenge in the future with possibly having to raise the roads or change the drainage where there might not be money right now, but...
Sure. Yeah, so it's, road paving and surface treatments are extremely costly. The techniques that we're using now, when we're paving roads, we're addressing all the underlying base issues that may be there with the road. If there's a really bad dip or a soft spot in a road, we'll dig that out, rehabilitate it, reconstruct that road at the base level. That's where, that black asphalt surface that you see, that's just sort of the icing on that cake. That's the final piece. That's the part everybody wants to see, but the structure of that road starts at the subgrade level. So just identifying those issues, and if you have a road that's just cracked and blown apart, within a couple of years, you could put fresh asphalt on it. It's going to be cracked and blown apart. Let's fix this thing the right way so that we can get a 25 to 30 year lifespan out of that asphalt material, which is what we should be almost getting. There's a lot of factors that obviously go into that. How the road is pitched, how does it drain, how does it dry off after it gets wet after a rain, is there a lot of tree cover that holds the moisture there? They know that how does that affect the icing on the road surface, which does a lot of damage to it. But one of, if not the largest contributor to deterioration of road condition is water. So we've tied our drainage program to our road paving program. So before we pave and invest a lot of money into a roadway, we come through and we rehabilitate or install additional or upgrade the drainage to handle the ability to get the water off the road on a 2-inch rainfall. That's our town code. And a lot of times exceeding that 2-inch rainfall. So we're moving through, and rather than sort of doing these small little patch paves, do a couple 100 feet, stop, move up the road a couple 100 feet, do this because that section was okay, but it wasn't as bad as that. We're trying to tend towards doing the entire neighborhood. The entire road is good in one shot. All the drainage is addressed, and then we're going to get the most lifespan that we can possibly get out of that road surface. We've corrected any of the pitches and the grades, spend extra time and do a lot of detail work with our paving contractor of, hey, we're out here with the transit. We need to raise this spot by 1 inch so that this little low spot is filled in and that water will continue down to that drain. Because there's nothing worse than you pave a road and, if you don't mill it and pave it and profile everything correctly, and then every driveway has a puddle at the end of it, that's horrible. We don't want that. We want our water in our drains where it needs to be, because anywhere that water's laying, it's going to degrade the road surface. So a lot of attention to the detail of the paving. There's a lot that can be done there to concentrate our water, redirect our water, and collect it in drainage structures, whether it be a new one that was never there, or a complete revamp of one that was there and maybe had failed or was not quite sized appropriately. So we've been tying those two things together, and we have a lot of really nice projects the last 2 years that we've paved, here on mainland Southold. We haven't paved on mainland yet this year. We're going to be starting end of this week, beginning of next week, and we've got a lot of really nice work that's been done. People have kind of had to wait, have kind of had to have some pretty tough conversations with people of, hey, listen, I know this road is really bad, but we need to do X, Y, and Z. And I think a lot of people are, yeah, it's never going to get done. And now that we've come through and done a lot of this stuff, we've had people actually reach back out and say, wow, this was nothing like we've ever seen. This was worth waiting for. This was a really nice project. You took care of this flood that always happened here, or this road had always had this really bad dip that would bottom my car out in this location. That's gone now, So it's sort of just, instead of breaking what seems like a pretty simple problem down into, we have a bad asphalt surface, let's just pave this and fix this. Why did that surface fail? We have some roads that were paved 10 years ago and they're failing. They didn't get the lifespan that they should have. What's the underlying cause of that? Let's fix the underlying cause and fix this the right way so that we only spend the money as infrequently as possible. Now, to your end with road raising, there's been several areas where we've had flooding issues, direct discharge pipes that went directly into a creek, and the road wouldn't flood because of runoff. The road would flood because the creek would back into the road because the pipe was at an elevation that it would allow that to do that. So these areas also needed to be resurfaced. They were in poor condition. So at that point, we were able to tie a resurfacing project into a road raising project. And I think a lot of people kind of think of a road raising project like, oh my goodness, they're going to be raising this road 3 feet. I mean, some of these instances, you're talking 18 to 20 inches. And profiling the road in a different way that sheds the storm water to a location that it didn't before. And sure, it cost a little bit more incrementally to do it, but it was a tenth of the cost of the overall project. And it's going to solve our problem there for now, what is the expected lifespan of that asphalt surface that's there. So as we deal with sea level rising and the projections, I mean, the projections are all over the place depending on what model you want to go by. Is it going to raise 6 inches or is it going to raise 6 feet? And what's the time span? What we need to remember is we're looking at 25 to 30 years of lifespan of that asphalt. So if we came up 18 inches, that's probably a pretty safe bet and lies within that bell curve of the probability of what we're going to be in the lifespan of that asphalt. And if we need to go higher at that point in 25, 30 years, we can figure out what we're going to do at that point, But it needs to be done in a way, particularly with the road raising, that it doesn't impact any of the private properties that are nearby. The idea is that the road is going to be at a higher elevation, so it's not going to be flooded, but at the same time, the road can't flood out everybody's property that's nearby. So that's where a public-private partnership, or at least an understanding of what's going to happen, everybody's got to be on the same page there. So it's a case-by-case, very site-specific sort of scenario.
And do you also look at, separately from that, how traffic and accidents that might happen, do you look into the stats on that to see, or is that more
so that's
different?
Transportation Commission sort of delves a little bit into some of the traffic counts and statistics and where accident locations are. Our highest incident and accident locations are, at our intersections with our state and county roads, by and large. So there's interjurisdictional, issues there that happen. But from the highway department perspective, we're more concerned with the maintenance of the roads and not necessarily, those sorts of things. For example, if a stop sign on a town road is voted on and approved, through public hearing and town board approval, we'll install those signs and those traffic control devices and then maintain them moving forward. But that's more of the accidents and things of that nature, not really something that we kind of look at.
Okay. And I had I had one other question related to just in the future with wind and hurricanes, and this might be like working with other departments or the county in terms of the electrical and the power lines. I think on the South Fork they might have done it, I don't know, in Montauk a bit, but in terms of burying
Underground.
underground, and I know some areas they can't do that with the water,
Sure.
but is that something that has been talked about?
It's it's a concern that's been brought up, particularly of residents east of the causeway out here, East Marion Orient Causeway. You know, the utilities are in control of all of their own stuff. We can bring those concerns to them. It's sort of up to them to act on them. You know, undergrounding utilities and submarine cables and things of that nature are a costly
Very expensive
project. Yeah. So that's really, you know, it's a decision that they have to make. And there's pros and cons to those sorts of things too. You know, my former employment, we actually worked on a number of submarine cable projects because they are not perfect either. There are things that happen with them. You know, you need to have duplicate or triplicate sources, and when they go down and when issues happen with them, it's a big deal.
It takes longer to kind of repair that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we did a lot of marine contracting in my previous, and it was always the job is going to cost twice as much and take 3 times the amount of time that it would take normally if this was on land at a baseline. So there's pros and cons to all of it. You know, at the end of the day, the thing that I think is encouraging is they definitely have a more formal approach to assessing their utility poles than they've ever had. So you'll notice guys sort of, you know, crews working around the base of utility poles, and they're doing testing on those poles to make sure that they're in good shape and able to withstand wind loads or the wire loads that they have on them based on what they're carrying. So they are doing testing on those poles. So that's encouraging. They are doing a lot of pruning out on the circuits out here. You know, we do work with PSEG to do takedowns on trees that are contained with wires that we are not able to work on. So we partner with them if there's a town tree that needs to be removed for good reason, or they have a tree that they've identified within their network, because they have arborists that are out looking at their lines all the time. So if it's a town tree, they'll come and ask for our approval to remove it, or if we just want them to prune it, or how they want to do it. So they are working pretty hard on resiliency and storm pruning, our major circuits out here. So it's encouraging to see that they are spending some time out here.
Yes. And what upcoming projects or initiatives is the highway department particularly excited about coming up?
Yeah, I mean, so we're full swing in basically our construction season right now. You know, we have our drainage crew is working every day, getting outfalls cut. You know, so that's something that's pretty exciting. Like I said, getting rid of those direct discharges to our surface water bodies is huge. That's good for everybody. It's good for the environment. It's good for our community. Some really good, road paving projects going on. Some nice sidewalk work we're looking to do this year, and that sort of thing. You know, one of the biggest things that I'm happy to be as involved as I have been, especially recently, is with the Emergency Management Committee. We've been sort of doing the rounds through the various civic groups and trying to re-bolster and get a new group of volunteers for our shelters. You know, like we said, we're in hurricane season now. It's not upon it's upon us. It's here. It's not coming anymore. But just helping to get people aware, and sort of that informational push and interaction with the people. You know, there's, like I kind of said earlier, there's a lot of people with various backgrounds here, and particularly, we do have a lot of newer residents to the area. and sort of just sharing with them, hey, if we get a storm, this is what could happen, or this is what you could expect, and just kind of trying to help them out and get that information out there for them. So that's sort of the stuff that we have going on. That's really kind of the highlights of everything. And then just working through the problems as they come up, and meeting some of our neighbors. I like to say the highway department is probably got the most amount of neighbors of anybody in town. So
Yeah.
It's nice to meet some of the people and get to know them a little bit.
Definitely. Are there any long-term goals that it might be a challenge right now in terms of having the funding, but were there any long-term goals that you're thinking on working on down the road?
Yeah, I mean, the long-term stuff, I'd love to see us do more with our sidewalks. Sidewalks is something that, have definitely been neglected. Lack of resources from the funding end has really been the issue with that. Sidewalks are very expensive. That is another major component that we bring contractors in for. Concrete work is tough, specialized work, particularly when we're looking at upgrading sidewalks to be ADA compliant. There's a lot of pitch and things that need to be pretty spot on there, as well as just all the tooling and the forms and the labor and everything that goes into it. It's more than what we have the capability to provide in-house. So I'd really like to see us continue to invest in our sidewalk network, working with some of my colleagues in the other towns and across Suffolk County. We have an association where we meet once a month and sort of discuss what we have going on in all of our neighboring towns, and starting to look at lobbying some of our local representatives up in Albany, to help us out with some funding. By and large, our resurfacing budget comes from the form of state aid, and that's money that's put into the New York State budget. So back in March, I attended an advocacy day with that same group, with some of those guys from that group up in Albany, where we met with our local lawmakers and basically advocated, hey, look, these are what we're dealing with inflationary costs of construction. This is where we're going. We need this for our roads. Our roads are important. These are people in our community are using these things. This is commerce for the local businesses use these roads. They need to have good condition. Our constituents in our communities deserve to have good roads. So just fighting for that additional funding, which is ultimately going to help us pave more roads and provide better infrastructure for everybody to use. And then, just really working with the emergency management, committee. That's something that plays a lot into my prior, work experience for the better part of a decade of, responding to those emergencies and dealing with the aftermath of some of these natural, disasters that we may face. I hope that we never have to face them, but when they come up, I want to be prepared and have everything together. And I want everybody in their own personal lives to be as prepared as they can be, and have the supplies they need and the understanding of, what they can expect and get through it as best they can.
Definitely. And I just had two other questions.
Sure.
Just in general, for your experience growing up and living here, what have you enjoyed the most about living and working on the North Fork?
I would say, just the whole experience, it's, like I said before, you could, do you want to go look at the bay or do you want to go look at the sound? You're never more than a 5-minute car ride away. Do you want to, go fishing, or would you rather go play a round of golf or go for a walk in the woods, or, so I think we're really, really spoiled with the number of opportunities for recreation that we have here. I really enjoy having the 4 different seasons to experience, the winter, spring, summer, and fall, and everything that comes along with that. The farms, and it's just a beautiful place to live, and the small town feel, and you know people in the grocery store. You can go to the post office and see people. You go, have breakfast at the diner and run into people, and it's good to see, a lot of familiar and some new faces out here, and everybody kind of looks out for each other, which is nice, and it's just a great place to have been raised and now be raising my own family here. I'm fortunate that I'm able to do that.
Mm-hmm. And just lastly, what do you hope for the future of the town of Southold and its community down the road?
That's another question that we could probably have a whole nother podcast on. No, I really hope I love what we have here. I loved what I grew up with. It's certainly, changed. I mean, I remember where I grew up. We grew up surrounded by I grew up surrounded by farms, and my alarm clock wasn't necessarily an alarm clock. It was the helicopter spraying the potatoes that were 40 feet away from my house. So I remember those things, and yeah, we've had a shift in agriculture. That's bound to happen. Things are changing. There's houses now. I talked about riding dirt bikes and quads and stuff, and a lot of those farm roads and those woods trails that we ran, they cut off by deer fence now, and there's houses that are there that were never there. I get it. That's all part of it. I think that the town has done a pretty good job at protecting some of these areas of what we have left, and that's great. I hope we don't lose our small town feel. I think there's a certain reverence and respect that needs to be sort of paid to what the history and the acknowledgement of the history of the place is, where our agriculture and our farms are able to continue whatever the crop may be at the time. You see livestock coming back. When I was a kid, there wasn't many. A couple people had some cows, but now you see fields of livestock and sheep and chickens and all that. That's good stuff to see. Oyster farms that are coming, and the local fish markets are still getting local fish and things of that nature. So I really hope that sort of business is able to be sustained, because that's really an important part of who we are as sort of the people of Southold Town. And it's a really important part of who we are and who this place is. And I think it deserves and commands a certain amount of respect, while we still move forward and allow people to be able to make a living and survive out here. It is getting tough with certain things. There was 99 people in my graduating class in Mattituck High School, and there's not many of us left out this way. There's a few. There's people that would like to come back here, but I don't think that's of the realm of possibility for them at this point. So there's a lot of things like that, and personally, I discuss it with my wife pretty often, and it's, I have a son and a daughter who are young, a 4-year-old and a 20-month-old, and what does that future look like for them should they want to stay here? I want them to have the same opportunity that I had of go away to whatever your source of education is, whether it's a trade school or college or whatever you want to do with your life, get your experience. And what can I do at my point in my life right now to be able to provide them the opportunity to come back, like the opportunity that I had? Yes. And if they don't want to come back here because they want to go a different direction in their life, then that's great. But just at least have them have that opportunity, because just seeing them, even though they're very young, I think they get it. They appreciate, the local libraries. I mean, my wife brings the kids to the local libraries, pretty regularly with the various programs, and my son and I like to go to the Cutshog Diner and have breakfast, or the local deli, and he loves to go fishing and go to the beach, and my daughter loves the same thing, all the outdoors and the animals and everything. So it's, just that family values that we have out here, I think is really, really important, and it's something I hope we never see go away out here.
Absolutely. That's something that I've seen other people comment on too, which I think is important. And was there anything else you wanted to say or discuss that we haven't talked about?
No, I don't think so. I think this. Just thank you for your opportunity to come on. I think there's a lot of really interesting people out here that have a varying background and story, and it's we're all a part of this place, so it's kind of interesting to get to know everybody and how they came to be and how they got here and what they think the area means to them.
Mm-hmm. So no, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come in today and share your story and all you're doing for the community, especially with the roads and infrastructure and making sure people are able to continue to move and provide a safe place for us to live and commute and move throughout the area.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity, and for anybody that's listening, if you ever have an issue, just send us an email, give us a call. We're more than happy to take a look at it and have a good honest conversation with you, and figure out what we can do to come to an agreement and a solution on a problem. That's what it's really all about. We're here to serve the community. So that's, if we're not serving and we're not responsive, we're not doing our jobs. So
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 65 with Dan Goodwin. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.